My sister accidentally sent me a voice memo meant for our mom. What she said about me made my blood run cold. She wasn't just venting, she was detailing exactly how she'd frame me for the disappearance of our family's inheritance. I was sitting in my car, waiting for the light at 4th and Main to turn green, when my phone buzzed in the cup holder. It was an audio file from my younger sister, Jenna. Normally, I'd ignore it. Jenna and I haven't been on great terms since I refused to co-sign for her third startup idea, but we were supposed to meet at our mom's house later to discuss the estate sale. I figured it was just her complaining about the traffic, or asking me to pick up a Starbucks on the way. I hit play. The sound of rustling fabric filled the car, followed by a muffled door slam. Then, Jenna's voice came through, but she wasn't talking to me. "Mom, I've got it all under control," she whispered. Her voice had the sharp, clinical edge I'd never heard before. "The lawyer thinks the signature on the trust is legitimate. He has no idea it's a forgery. Once Sarah signs those final papers today, she's effectively waiving her rights to the house and the accounts." I felt the air leave my lungs. The light turned green. Someone honked behind me, but I couldn't move. My hands were frozen on the steering wheel. "And the best part," Jenna continued, "she's so stressed out from work that if we play our cards right, we can make it look like she's having another breakdown. If she's deemed unfit, I get full power of attorney over her assets, too." I felt a cold, oily shiver slide down my spine. My sister wasn't just trying to take my inheritance. She was trying to take my life. And she was doing it with our mother's help. I thought that was the peak of the betrayal, but I was wrong. Because what Jenna said next revealed a truth so dark it made the forgery look like child's play. "Just make sure that bottle of pills stays in her guest room, Mom. The same ones you used on Dad. Once she's gone, we never have to worry about the truth coming out." I dropped the phone. It clattered into the dark space between the seat and the center console. I wasn't just listening to a scam. I was listening to a murder confession, and I was the next target. I finally managed to pull over into a gas station parking lot. My heart was hammering against my ribs so hard it hurt. I needed to breathe. I needed to think. But most of all, I needed to get that recording saved before she realized her mistake. I fished the phone out from under the seat. My fingers were shaking so badly I almost dropped it again. I looked at the message thread. The little delivered icon sat there like a ticking time bomb. Then, drafting. The 3 little dots appeared. She knew. The dots disappeared. Then they came back. "Amji, Sarah, disregard that. It was a script for my acting class, lol. So embarrassing. See you at Mom's at 5? I stared at the screen. Acting class. Jenna hadn't taken an acting class since the 3rd grade. I looked at the clock on my dashboard. 4:15 p.m. I had 45 minutes before I was expected at a house, where my mother and sister were waiting with a bottle of pills and a forged document. I thought about calling the police, but then I realized, what did I actually have? A muffled recording of a girl talking about pills and forgeries. In our small town, my mother was a saint. She was the woman who baked pies for the church and spent every Sunday volunteering at the hospice. I was the unstable one, the one who moved away to the big city and had a nervous exhaustion episode 3 years ago. If I went to the cops now, they'd call it a misunderstanding. They'd call it a mental health crisis. And then Jenna would know for sure that I was onto them. I realized I couldn't run. I had to play the game, but I wasn't going to play it by their rules. I pulled out of the gas station and headed toward the one place Jenna would never expect me to go, the local pharmacy. I didn't go inside for a prescription. I went inside to talk to Mr. Henderson. I had been the pharmacist for 40 years. He had filled every single one of my father's prescriptions before he passed away from a sudden heart attack last summer. "Mr. Henderson," I said, leaning over the counter, "I'm looking for a refill on my dad's old heart medication. For the record." He looked at me over his bifocals. "Sarah, your father wasn't on heart medication. You know that." I froze. "What do you mean?" Mom said he died of an arrhythmia. Mr. Henderson frowned and tapped a few keys on his old computer. "The only thing your mother ever picked up for your father in the last 6 months was a heavy-duty sedative, something used for severe insomnia, but he was taking it in doses that would knock out a horse." I felt the blood drain from my face. Insomnia. My father didn't have insomnia. He was a marathon runner. He was the healthiest man I knew, until he suddenly couldn't get out of bed, until he slipped and fell down the stairs. I thanked Mr. Henderson and walked out into the humid afternoon air. The pieces were clicking together. My mother wasn't just an accomplice. She was the architect, and Jenna was the hungry apprentice. I got back into my car and drove to my mother's house. The Victorian-style home sat at the end of a long, tree-lined driveway. It looked beautiful, peaceful, but as I looked at the flower beds, I noticed the dirt near the porch had been freshly turned, not for flowers. The hole was too deep, too long. I parked the car and checked my purse. I had my phone recording. I had an extra battery pack, and I had the pepper spray I'd bought in the city. I walked up the steps. The front door creaked open before I could even knock. There stood my mother. She was wearing her floral apron. She smelled like cinnamon and vanilla. "Sarah, darling, you're just in time," she chirped. "Jenna is in the kitchen. kitchen. We made your favorite herbal tea. I stepped into the house. The air felt heavy, like the atmosphere before a massive thunderstorm. I walked into the kitchen and saw Jenna. She was leaning against the counter, her eyes fixed on her phone. When she saw me, she gave me a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Hey, sis," she said. "Did you get my text about the acting script? I'm so clumsy with my thumb." "I got it," I said. I sat down at the table. In front of me sat a steaming cup of tea, and next to it the thick stack of legal papers for the estate. "So," I said, looking from my mother to my sister, "where should I sign?" Jenna's eyes lit up. She pushed the papers toward me and handed me a pen. "Just on the last 3 pages," she said. "It just confirms that we're all in agreement about the sale. It'll be so much easier this way, Sarah. No more stress." I picked up the pen. I leaned over the paper, but then I stopped. "You know," I said, looking at the tea, "I'm actually really thirsty. Jenna, why don't you take a sip of mine? I think it might be too hot." The silence that followed was absolute. Jenna's smile faltered. My mother stopped mid-stir at the stove. "Don't be silly, Sarah," my mother said, her voice dropping an octave. Eventually, Bethany dropping, now we're dropping an octave. "Drink your tea. You look so tired. You need the rest." "I'm not tired, Mom," I said. "In fact, I've never been more awake." I pulled my phone out and placed it on the table. I hit play. The recording of Jenna's voice filled the room. The same ones used on Dad. Jenna lunged for the phone. I was faster. I stood up, knocking the chair over. "I've already sent this file to 3 different people," I lied. "If I don't check in with them in an hour, they'll call the sheriff." My mother didn't scream. She didn't cry. She just stood there, clutching a kitchen knife. "You always were the difficult one, Sarah," she whispered. "Your father was the same way, always asking questions, always looking in drawers where he didn't belong." "Is that why you killed him?" I screamed. "We did what we had to do to survive," Jenna yelled. He was going to divorce her. He was going to leave us with nothing, and that was when everything changed. I thought I was just protecting myself. I thought I was just uncovering a murder. But then, the back door burst open. I thought it was the police, but it wasn't. It was a man I hadn't seen in 10 years. My father's brother, Uncle Elias. He wasn't alone. He was holding a digital recorder. "I told you, Sarah," he said, looking at me with pity. "I told you they weren't finished." I looked at him confused. "Uncle Elias? What are you doing here?" "I've been watching them for months," he said. "I knew what they did to my brother, but I needed a confession. And thanks to Jenna's little accident, we finally have it." He turned to my mother. "The police are in the driveway, Martha. It's over." The siren started then. Red and blue lights flickered through the kitchen window, dancing off the floral wallpaper. I watched as they led my mother and sister out in handcuffs. Jenna was sobbing, screaming that it was all my fault. My mother just stared at me. That cold, saintly expression never left her face. I thought that was the end of the nightmare, but a week later, I received a package in the mail. It was from the lawyer's office. Inside was the real trust, the one my father had written before he died, the one Jenna hadn't been able to find. I opened the envelope and read the first line. "To my daughter Sarah, the only one who stayed true. I know what they are doing to me. If you are reading this, I am already gone. Do not look for justice in the courts. Look in the basement." I went back to that house one last time. I went down into the dark, damp basement. Behind a loose brick near the furnace, I found a small, locked box. Inside wasn't money. It wasn't a confession. It was a series of photographs. Photographs of my mother with a man who looked exactly like the lawyer who had been helping Jenna with the forgeries. But that wasn't the shock. The shock was the date on the photos. They were taken 30 years ago, the year I was born. I looked at the man in the photo. He had my eyes. He had my jawline. I realized then that my father hadn't been murdered because of money. He had been murdered because he found out that I wasn't his. And my mother had spent my entire life trying to erase the evidence of her greatest sin by trying to erase me. Powerful final ending line. They spent decades trying to bury their secrets, but they forgot that I was the one secret they can never truly hide. Sometimes the people closest to us are the ones we know the least. Have you ever discovered a family secret that changed the way you looked at your parents? Let me know in the comments below. And if you want to hear more stories of betrayal and survival, hit that subscribe button. You never know who's listening.